Well, now Harry and Meghan's lick-spittle client journalist Omid Scobie, the man who lied about his age, said he was 33 when in fact he was 38, a bit older now, said he never used private jets and then got reminded of an Instagram picture of him the week before he denied that this week, showing him on a private jet. The man who said that I have regular phone calls with Queen Camilla, regular phone calls. Never had one phone call with Queen Camilla in my entire life. I'd like to, but she doesn't call. Well, Scobie is back with a spiteful, lie-filled new book that's poured fuel on the flames. He says that Meghan wrote private letters to King Charles, naming two royals who she accuses of taking part in those supposedly troubling conversations about Archie's skin colour. Scobie initially said he knew the names but couldn't legally report them. But of course, he could have done outside of the UK. He could have done it in America if he wanted to, where the book is published. He could have done it anywhere. But he said he never names names, which is another of his lies. And yet overnight they were sensationally revealed, suddenly, out of nowhere, in the Dutch version of Scobie's book. Journalists had been sent copies and the book was briefly on sale in bookstores before being suddenly withdrawn in a dash by the publishers. Scobie initially said it was a translation error, which didn't really make any sense because how do you mistranslate names? They're either there or they're not. The publisher now says it wasn't translation, it was simply an error. But how did that error happen? How is there an entire different version appearing in a Dutch edition of this book? The consequence of that error is that millions of people online around the world now know the royals are again being implicated in what I think is a completely baseless claim of inferred racism. There is, again, massive speculation about who the people are who were supposedly making comments about Archie's skin colour, which is incredibly unfair to all the royal family. They've all been tarred with this brush now for years. Well, I'm going to end all this nonsense because, frankly, if a book is on the streets in Holland, available to Dutch people, containing names that Omid Scobie, the lick-spittle scribe for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, the man who you may remember denied they had any involvement in the last book. And so did Meghan. Do you remember? No, nothing to do with it. But then in court, many months after the book was published, under oath, she had to admit she had emailed her aides briefing notes for when they met Scobie. So she was one of his primary sources on that first book. Now again, we're being told she had nothing to do with this. And maybe she didn't. And maybe we should be believing Omid Scobie when he says he did not ever write these names down in any draft of his book. It just somehow popped up in the Dutch version of the book. How? I've written 10 books, I think it is now. I've never had a version of my book pop up in a foreign edition that contained unbelievably damning allegations about two of the most famous people in the world, and I had nothing to do with it and didn't know how it got there, and nor did anybody else. How does it get there, Omid? Surely you as the author, I mean, you must be furious, right? You must be demanding. Heads roll. And you want names, don't you, ironically, Omid, about who did this to you? Who besmirched your reputation as an author? I would, Omid. I'd want to know right now, especially if I was trying to convince the world that I had nothing to do with it myself and I'd never, ever put these names in writing and maybe some lawyer had come along and told me not to. I mean, that couldn't possibly have happened because you've given us your word, and as I've established so far in this monologue, your word is your bond and should be taken as sacrosanct. Well, I'm going to cut through all this crap. I'm going to tell you the names of the two senior royals who are named in that Dutch version of the book. Because frankly, if Dutch people wandering into a bookshop can pick it up and see these names, then you, British people here, who actually pay for the British royal family, you're entitled to know too. And then we can have a more open debate about this whole farrago, because I don't believe any racist comments were ever made by any of the royal family. And until there is actual evidence of those comments being made, I will never believe it. But now we can start the process of finding out if they ever got uttered, what the context was, and whether there was any racial intent at all. Like I say, I don't believe there was. The royals who are named in this book are King Charles and Catherine, Princess of Wales. Well, joining me now is the royal editor of the Sunday Times, Roy Dicker, who just discovered I was going to do that, royal biographer Tom Bower, who also just discovered I was going to do that, and the professor of Black Studies at Birmingham University, Kehinde Andrews. But first, the Dutch royal journalist Rick Evers, who has read the damning excerpt because he's seen it in the Dutch version. Let me talk to you, Rick, first of all. When you first saw what appeared in the Dutch version, what did you think?
Well, I wouldn't think I would have some big scoop, because I was thinking that everyone in the whole world would have the same copy, except it would be in English. So I wasn't aware that it was such a big thing.
How do you think?
Of course, it is a big thing that their names are in it, but
right.
Everyone would have the same copy, isn't it? Usually.
Right. Well, I couldn't work out in my rational head why you should know what those names were, but British people shouldn't. So that's why I've said them. And to repeat, I don't believe a word of these racism claims, never have done. Yeah. I've seen no evidence to suggest they're true. I think it was an ugly smear. And now at least we can have a public debate about it and people can say what they really want to say about it. But from your perspective, how do you think these paragraphs appeared in the Dutch version if Omid Scobie, the author, insists, as he has done, that he had nothing to do with it, never put these names in writing, never supplied a draft with those names?
First of all, I want to say, after your track record, Piers, it would be very unimpressed if you didn't mention these names. So well done, because you're the first one, I think, on TV that's doing that.
To be honest with you, I don't understand why journalists wouldn't. I haven't understood why we haven't so far, because the moment a book is published and available to people on the streets of another country containing these names, I don't even know if these are the two names of the two people that Meghan Markle originally with Harry claimed made these comments. We don't know. But we do know they've appeared in the book, a version of the book, and it's Omid Scobie's book, and we do know that under oath Meghan Markle admitted that she conspired in his last book as one of his sources. So let's wait and see how this plays out. But again, just to come back, what do Dutch people in the media think has happened here?
Well, I don't think Dutch people really care about it, because it's the U.S. royal family in this case that is involved. Not even the British royal family, actually, because people don't believe it, I think. But on the other hand, how did it end up in the book? I think it is in the way Omid is describing it. It was not in the manuscript. What is the manuscript? Is it the final version that you hand in at your publisher? In that case, it was in an earlier version, and it got erased in all the other versions all over the world, except for that tiny little country, the Netherlands, that has been overlooked. Maybe someone overlooked the Netherlands to send us a memo, the publisher, or maybe the publisher forgot to do it. I don't know.
Well, it's very mysterious. Let me go to another seasoned author, Tom Bower. You've written many books. Have you ever known a situation, Tom, where a version of your book has appeared in a foreign version containing paragraphs you knew nothing about that contain bombshell revelations?
It's impossible. And also, more to the point, he also complained that the French translations were wrong too. I mean, the problem with Scobie is everyone is getting it wrong what he wrote. But of course, he can't probably remember what he wrote himself because it's so full of fabrications.
Well, I'm not saying he's lying about having no involvement in this. I'm just saying generally he's a terrible liar.
He's a terrible liar. We know that from his own statement about the briefing from Jason Knauf, which Meghan gave him. We know he's a liar. And I think he's fabricated a lot in his book. And he lied when he said he didn't have Meghan's help in this book. Clearly, he was briefed by Meghan's people from California.
He says they share mutual friends, right? But those friends would not be allowed to cooperate with him without permission.
Exactly. It's exactly before. This is all. His book, again, is Meghan's voice. Why is she decided to launch another war, a battle against the royal family? That's for her to explain. But she hasn't dissociated herself from Omid.
Have you ever thought that there was any racial intent
No,
from
no,
any comments made.
No. I mean, the whole this is actually I explained it in my Meghan book very clearly. It was a very, very early on in Harry's relationship with Meghan. He goes for tea to Clarence's house. He's sitting there with King Charles, Prince Charles then, and Camilla, and they eventually discover who he's dating and all the rest of it. And Camilla, very as a joke, just says, "I wonder what your baby will look like. Will he or she have ginger hair?" It's just the normal. And when that originally came out, it had nothing to do with racism, as Harry himself admits. It was all to do with the perennial problem. What will your baby look like if it comes from different parents?
I just thought it was incredibly disingenuous of Harry, after 2 years of feverish racism slurs.
The thing about Harry
he then said, well, we never meant to infer racism.
No, but the whole point is in the Opera interview that he comes onto the programme after Meghan has spoken and says, no, she's wrong. It all happened long before she was pregnant. It happened right at the beginning of our relationship. It was just a normal tea conversation.
Nearly 2 years before.
Exactly. And so Meghan had lied. I mean, there were 17 lies she uttered in the Opera interview. That was one of her lies. And that is the problem. He's now hoist by it. But the real problem is he's caused enormous damage. And Scobie...
Huge damage.
And Scobie, to get some money and all the rest, stirs it again and again and again. But this time, yet again, is definitely with Meghan's approval.
OK, Roy, look, you didn't know I was going to do the naming of these two people. I don't want to get you involved in that directly. You're a royal correspondent. But on the wider picture, this book is getting more and more attention. It's now front page news of many papers. It clearly has a lot of damaging revelations. It follows a familiar pattern from his first book. All the main royals are awful. Duke and Duchess of Sussex are angelic, and weren't they treated so badly? How significant is this book? Is it going to actually have any real effect, do you think?
Well, it's interesting you say it's full of damaging revelations and bombshells, because actually from what I have read so far, it's just full of Omid's own highly partisan views and opinions, rather than fact-based, damaging bombshell allegations that I think a lot of people thought were going to be unveiled with real, proper evidence behind them. And I have to say, I've been asked about the book a lot this week, and it's just felt quite predictable. And of course, it was always going to get lots of traction because it's Omid, it's the royals. But it just feels, once again, like Finding Freedom, a very one-sided, partisan. The rest of the royal family are awful. Harry and Meghan smell of roses. And I think actually the British public and a lot of the wider public are able to sort of decide for themselves which camp they're in, how much they believe, how much they don't. I mean, you've talked about already this week the things that Omid has said about you that aren't true.
Yeah.
He's really not a fan of the Sunday Times coverage I've read, and he had a whinge and a moan about my William interview knocking off Trooping the Colour from the front page. We never put Trooping the Colour on the front page, and so on and so forth. So I think, is it going to be hugely damaging? I think it'll whip up a storm, predictably, to get publicity, and I feel that possibly something around these names could be to do with publicity. But I don't think it's going to have real lasting damage, because I don't think people are going to believe all his opinions. Right,
and they shouldn't, by the way, from my experience. But in terms of, I guess, the family relationships here, particularly Harry and his father, we were reading signs of potential rapprochement. Would they come to Sandringham? I got to say, I think I've got more chance of being at Sandringham than Meghan Markle pulling
that was my story. They'd like
festive
to.
crackers.
They'd like to.
Yeah, it was your story. Yeah, but none of this is going to help, because there is this belief, which may or may not be true in the case of this book. I don't know, right? But we know in the first book, Meghan Markle said she had nothing to do with it, and then under oath had to admit she did. If it turns out the same has happened here, and she's authorised friends to help him and give him stuff, because let's face it, this exchange of letters between Charles and Meghan Markle, only one of them can have told people about that. And Charles is not the kind of guy that's going to be telling people about a letter like that, which makes me think it's her and her friends, or somebody has gone to Scobie. We'll wait and see. But if that is the case, this is going to be very damaging to the ongoing trust issues between Charles and Harry.
Well, trust is the key issue, and I think that was something I touched on in that piece about them saying we wouldn't decline an invitation to spend time with the family. The problem is, as you just rightly said, imagine what a whole Christmas at Sandringham would produce in terms of potential future content. And I think looking at, the phone call between Charles and Harry and Meghan around Charles' 70th birthday, it was briefed before it happened, and it was briefed after. And I think if you can't even have a private phone conversation that isn't briefed before or after...
I honestly wouldn't trust, if that was someone in my family, after what they've done, repeatedly, I wouldn't trust them as far as I could throw them.
Trust is the issue, and that's not changing anytime soon.
Let's go to Kehinde, Andrew, who's been waiting patiently here. Kehinde, we've talked a lot about race issues over the years, but specifically here, there is no doubt that when they went on Oprah Winfrey 2 years ago, they made a series of allegations directly inferring racism by senior members of the royal family, which they've never produced evidence for, and which 2 years later Harry said, oh, we didn't mean racism, we meant unconscious bias and so on. Do you not feel that that is incredibly damaging to people like you who constantly fight battles for racial equality, racial justice, try and fight proper battles about this? Is it not incredibly damaging to that when someone of their profile tries to pretend what they said to Oprah Winfrey was not what it was?
Well, no. I mean, I think the allegations when they came out, we all kind of believed it. It wasn't something that seems completely outrageous. Also, I'm not sure what evidence you could have. And actually, if you listen to the clips, they're clearly trying not to say the names because they know the names are going to cause this massive storm. But I think the bigger problem with the whole way this has been portrayed is Oprah's shocked, everybody's shocked. No black person I know was shocked that this came up in a conversation in the royal family. And the bigger problem here really is that actually it isn't about racist royals. It's about the royal family is racism. It is a symbol of white supremacy. That's the bigger problem.
Well, because
the way we
they're white.
talk about this now is completely
Because
ludicrous.
they're white.
No, not because they're white, but not
What?
because they're white, because they are
Where is
almost
the evidence?
exclusively
Where is
white,
the evidence
because
of
they
them
are
being white
the link-
supremacists?
The link back to the link back to colonialism. Why do we even the idea that a country like Britain, which is incredibly diverse, an empire which was more diverse, is led by this almost exclusively white family into the 21st century? I'm sorry, that is
So,
a
so you're
permanent
judging
symbol
them
of
by
white
their
supremacy.
skin
That's
colour.
the issue of racism.
So just to be clear, you're judging them by their skin
No,
colour,
no,
not the
no.
content of their characters.
No. I'm saying their skin color is not an accident. It is not an accident that Meghan Markle
they're
is the
white.
first black person to
They
go
can't
into
help
the
being
family.
white,
It is not an
Kehinde.
accident that she's run out of the family.
Kehinde, they're
No, but
white,
that's
you're
their
black,
whiteness is the
I'm
point.
white. We
It's
can't
not
help
acci-
our skin colour.
It's not about their skin color. It's about what it represents. The idea that that King Charles is the king of my family's from Jamaica, which is 90% black people, and the king of the head of state of Jamaica is the King Charles. It's ludicrous. That is a ludicrous thing in the 21st century. But that is what I'm saying. Symbol of white supremacy.
Well,
That's
you're
what
gonna
the
have a
problem
vote.
is.
Yeah,
I
I
couldn't
mean,
care
you
less
could-
if it was Kate.
Listen, countries like Jamaica will have votes and they can
It's not about
decide.
having a vote. It's about the.
No, but
No,
what
it's
the
about the
point is, you
history,
can.
it's about why
There
is
are
that. How can you
countries
defend
choosing.
it?
There are countries like Jamaica choosing whether they want to go independent. That's absolutely a democratic right. You don't have to have our
No, my
monarch as
point
the
is
head of state.
The fact that's a choice. The fact that's a choice in the 21st century tells you there's a big problem.
But
And I'm just telling
do
you,
you
the
think
fact that this
anyone
family is
then,
almost
so
exclusively
anyone
white
in the royal
is
family,
not an
Kehinde,
accident.
just to be clear, anyone in the royal family, as far as you're concerned, is a white supremacist simply because they're white and they're part of the
No,
royal family?
What I'm saying is the royal family, like the police or like universities where I work, they are institutions of white supremacy. It's not about the individuals. It's about what they do. It's about their role in the world. That's the real case. The royal family should be gone. It should be abolished. It shouldn't exist if we're talking about anti-racism. I really couldn't care less which royal said what, because that actually distracts.
What if
from
they
the bigger
didn't say it
issue
at all?
of why on earth we would accept
What
this?
if they didn't say it at all, but the whole world has been led for 2-3 years to believe that they did? What about that scenario?
Like I said, this doesn't, like for me, it really doesn't matter whether they said it or not. It's
Because
not
you
the
think they're all
issue of
racist
racism
anyway,
is
right?
not about individual people. So it's not they are all racist. They are in an institution which is racism, which is one of these primary symbols of racism.
You know, sometimes,
I think it is a
Kehinde,
bit surprising that Kate. I think
I'm going to say sometimes, you know, when your default position, which it always is, by the way, is that everyone's a white supremacist if they've got white skin colour until they can prove otherwise. It is your default
that is
position.
not what I said.
And it is your default position.
Piers, you know it's not what I said.
That's always been your default position.
I said that the institution.
Any
no,
white
my-
people in
my
any
default
position of
position is
authority,
that-
power, anything,
No,
they're all
my
white supremacists
default
according to you.
position-
It does beg the question,
my
why,
default position
why
is
do you
that
want to
any
live in a country
institution-
like this if they're
Any
all white
institution
supremacists?
like the why should I could go home back to Jamaica.
No,
but unfortunately,
I don't care.
The head of state is the king.
You can go.
It's the same problem. I can't even
Kehinde,
get away from it.
You can go
in the
where the
place
hell
my
you
family's
like.
from.
I'm just saying, why, honestly, why stay in a country you believe is led in every pillar of the establishment and society by white supremacists? Makes no sense to me.
Because the reality is that that's the world. I didn't choose the world. That is the world that I inhabit. And I would stress, I'm not saying that all white people are white supremacists. I actually think when we think about racism as individual races, it's the worst way to think about it. Think about the systems, think about the institutions. And the royal family is exclusively white for a reason. It is the head of the so-called Commonwealth British Empire for a reason. It is a direct connection to the colonial history that this country loves so much. It is the premier symbol of white supremacy.
You know
And I
what?
couldn't
It's
care less
actually,
which one of those
it's
people
actually
in the
not
House
exclusively white.
made these comments.
It's not exclusively white because the Duchess of
Almost
Sussex.
exclusively. I said
the
almost
Duchess of
exclusively.
Sussex is not
I said
white.
almost exclusively.
What she did do was
Yeah,
she entered the royal
exception
family.
that proves the rule.
She launched a grenade of racism allegations and has ever since stayed silent about
She
those
barely did
and let
anything.
them
She
run
came into the
riot
royal
around the
family.
world. I mean, that to me,
She came into the royal family and her blackness was so much of an affront
in its
that
way,
everybody lost their minds.
that in its way is a form of racism, actually, in my view, what she's done. But we'll see. We'll see how this all plays out now because I've decided to name
Piers,
the two
are you
people
really accusing Meghan Markle
named
of
in the
racism?
Holland version of this book. Let's see how this plays out. Let's see whether Meghan Markle and Harry were involved with Scobie's book. Let's see what Scobie and his involvement in this offending paragraph and naming was. Let's just see how this all plays out. And let's give the members of the royal family that they besmirched collectively, let's give them the chance to properly respond. Because I don't believe a word of it. Anyway, Kehinde, it's always good to talk to you. Thank you very much.